Welcome to Creepshow, where we delve into the darkest corners of human history. In today's video, we uncover the top 10 evil human experiments ever conducted. From the infamous Nazi medical atrocities to secretive CIA mind control programs, these horrifying events push the boundaries of human ethics and morality. Viewer discretion is advised, as this video contains graphic and disturbing descriptions of human experimentation. Let's journey into these chilling stories and remember the victims who suffered in the name of science and power. It is important to note that the following list contains descriptions and images of human experimentation, which may be offensive to some readers. Over the course of history, human experimentation and research ethics have developed. There have been instances in which criminals, slaves, or even members of the same family have been used as subjects in experiments involving humans. A number of noteworthy instances have occurred in which medical professionals have conducted experiments on themselves when they were unwilling to put the lives of others in danger. Another name for this practice is self-experimentation. A list of the 10 most heinous and unethical experiments that have been conducted on human subjects is shown below. Number 10. Stanford Prison Experiment. It was a psychological study of human responses to captivity and the behavioral consequences that it had on both the authorities and the inmates who were being held in prison. The Stanford Prison Experiment was conducted. The experiment was carried out at Stanford University in 1971 by a group of researchers under the direction of psychologist Philip Zimbardo to test the hypothesis. A mock prison was constructed in the basement of the Stanford Psychology Building, and undergraduate volunteers acted out the roles of both guards and prisoners who were assigned to the prison. There was a rapid adaptation of both prisoners and guards to their respective roles, which went beyond the limitations of what had been anticipated and resulted in situations that were both dangerous and psychologically destructive. It was determined that 1/3 of the guards had demonstrated genuine sadistic tendencies, and a significant number of the prisoners had experienced emotional stress. Additionally, 2 of the convicts had to be removed from the experiment at an earlier stage. Zimbardo, who was concerned about the increasingly hostile and antisocial behavior exhibited by his subjects, ultimately decided to suspend the entire experiment before it was completed. Number 9. The Study of the Monster. An experiment on stuttering was carried out by Wendell Johnson at the University of Iowa in 1939 on a group of 22 orphan children in Davenport, Iowa. The experiment was known as the Monster Study. Mary Tudor, one of Johnson's graduate students, was selected to carry out the experiment, and Johnson served as the academic advisor for her research. Following the placement of the children in the control and experimental groups, Tudor administered positive speech therapy to half of the children, praising the fluency of their speech. On the other hand, he administered negative speech treatment to the other half of the children, ridiculing them for every speech flaw and telling them that they were stutterers. During the course of the experiment, a significant number of the orphan children who were able to talk normally and who were subjected to negative therapy experienced adverse psychological impacts, and some of them continued to struggle with speech issues throughout their lives. Some of Johnson's contemporaries, who were outraged that he would experiment on orphan children to establish a theory, referred to the experiment as the Monster Study. However, the experiment was kept a secret because of fear that Johnson's reputation would be ruined in the wake of human experimentation that were carried out by the Nazis during World War II. An apology was sent to the general public by the University of Iowa in 2001 for the Monster Study. Number 8. Project 4.1. Project 4.1 was the name given to a medical research that was carried out by the United States of America on the people who lived in the Marshall Islands and were exposed to radioactive fallout as a result of the Castle Bravo nuclear test that took place on Bikini Atoll on March 1, 1954. The resulting yield was far higher than planned. The effects were ambiguous and difficult to correlate statistically to radiation exposure for the first decade after the test. The number of miscarriages and stillbirths among women who were exposed to radiation at Rongelap increased by a factor of 2 in the first 5 years after the accident, but then returned to normal. Some developmental difficulties and impaired growth appeared in children, but there was no clear-cut pattern. The impacts, on the other hand, were unequivocally visible in the decades that followed. By 1974, roughly a third of people who were exposed to radioiodines acquired neoplasms. This was attributable to the fact that children continued to suffer from thyroid cancer at a disproportionately higher rate than adults. It appears to have been almost immediately apparent to the AEC and the Joint Task Force running the Castle series that research on radiation effects could be done in conjunction with the medical treatment of the exposed populations, wrote a committee of the Department of Energy in its report on the humans who were subjected to radiation experiments. The study from the Department of Energy also came to the conclusion that the dual purpose of what is now a medical program through the Department of Energy has led to a view by the Marshallese that they were being used as guinea pigs in a radiation experiment. Number 7. The MKUltra project, the code name for a mind control research program that was conducted by the Office of Scientific Intelligence and was controlled by the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, began in the early 1950s and continued at least until the late 1960s. This program was known as Project MKUltra, or MKUltra. Numerous pieces of evidence have been revealed that demonstrate that the project entailed the covert administration of a wide variety of medications, in addition to other methods, with the intention of manipulating the mental states of individuals and modifying the functioning of the brain. Experiments were conducted in which LSD was given to staff members of the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, members of the military, medical professionals, other government officials, prostitutes, individuals suffering from mental illness, and members of the general public in order to investigate their reactions. The administration of LSD and other drugs was typically carried out without the subject's awareness or informed permission, which was a breach of the Nuremberg Code, which the United States of America promised to enforce after World War II. Efforts to recruit people were frequently unlawful, and they even ignored the fact that drugs were being provided to the subjects, although the actual usage of LSD, for instance, was legal in the United States until October 6, 1966. During the course of Operation Midnight Climax, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, established a number of brothels in order to acquire a selection of men who would be too humiliated to discuss the occurrences. LSD was administered to the men, and the brothels were outfitted with one-way mirrors. Additionally, the sessions were filmed for subsequent watching and analysis. When Richard Helms was the director of the CIA in 1973, he gave the order to destroy all MKUltra files. This order resulted in the destruction of the majority of CIA papers pertaining to the project, which rendered it extremely difficult to conduct a comprehensive examination of MKUltra. Number 6. The Aversion project. In the 1970s and 1980s, the apartheid army of South Africa forcibly subjected white lesbian and homosexual troops to sex change procedures. Additionally, many of these soldiers were subjected to chemical castration, electric shock, and other unethical medical experiments. Although the precise number is unknown, former apartheid army surgeons estimate that as many as 900 forced sexual reassignment procedures may have been carried out between 1971 and 1989 in military hospitals. These operations were carried out as part of a top-secret campaign to eradicate homosexuality from the service. Army psychiatrists, with the assistance of chaplains, conducted a vigorous search for individuals who were suspected of being homosexuals inside the armed services. These individuals were then discreetly transferred to military mental hospitals, primarily Ward 22 of one military hospital in Voortrekkerhoogte, which is located close to Pretoria. Chemical castration or sex change procedures were performed on those individuals who were unable to be cured by the use of extreme psychiatric methods like as medications, aversion shock therapy, hormone treatment, and other comparable methods. The majority of the victims appear to have been young white males between the ages of 16 and 24 who were drafted into the apartheid army. This is despite the fact that there have been several reported incidents of lesbian soldiers being abused throughout the years, including one failed attempt at sex change. The individual who was in charge of the research, Dr. Aubrey Levin, is currently working as a clinical professor in the Department of Psychiatry, Forensic Division at the Medical School of the University of Calgary. In addition to that, he is a member of the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta who is in good standing and continues to work in private practice. Number 5. North Korean experimentation. A great number of reports have surfaced regarding North Korean experiments on human subjects. The breaches of human rights that are documented in these papers are comparable to those that occurred during World War II in Japan and the Nazi regime. These charges of violations of human rights are refuted by the government of North Korea, which asserts that all detainees in North Korea are handled in a compassionate manner. A woman who had previously been incarcerated in North Korea describes how 50 healthy women convicts were chosen and handed poisoned cabbage leaves. Everyone in the group was required to consume the cabbage leaves, despite the fact that some of the ladies had already consumed them. After 20 minutes of vomiting blood and bleeding from the eye, all 50 of them had passed away. It would have resulted in retaliation against them and their families if they had refused to consume food. Kwon Hyok, a former jail head of security at Camp 22, detailed rooms that were prepared correspondingly for experiments with poison gas, suffocation gas, and blood. These laboratories were designed to conduct experiments involving 3 or 4 individuals, typically members of the same family. Following the completion of medical examinations, the chambers are then shut, and poison is injected through a tube. Scientists examine the process from a higher vantage point through glass. Kwon Hyok asserts that he witnessed a family consisting of 2 parents, a son and a daughter, all of whom perished as a result of suffocating gas. The parents attempted to save their children by doing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation for as long as they had the stamina to accomplish so. Number 4. Poison Laboratory of the Soviets. The Poison Laboratory of the Soviet Secret Services, sometimes referred to as Laboratory 1, Laboratory 12, and the Chamber, was a covert institution owned and operated by the Soviet secret police agencies that was responsible for conducting research and development on poison. The Soviet Union conducted experiments on prisoners from the Gulag, sometimes known as enemies of the people, using a variety of lethal poisons. These poisons included mustard gas, ricin, digitoxin, and many others. Experiments were conducted with the intention of locating a chemical that was odorless, tasteless, and could not be detected after the death of a person. Candidates for poisons were administered to the victims in the form of medication, together with a meal or drink. At long last, a preparation known as C2 was produced that possessed the features that were sought after. Testimonies from witnesses indicate that the sufferer underwent a bodily transformation, becoming shorter, rapidly losing strength, becoming peaceful and silent, and ultimately passing away within 15 minutes. For the purpose of gaining a more comprehensive understanding of the effects of each poison, Marinovsky brought into the laboratory individuals who were of varying ages and physical conditions respectively. In addition to conducting experiments on humans, Marinovsky personally carried out the execution of individuals by means of poisons, with Pavel Sudoplatov serving as his supervisor. Number 3. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study. The Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male was a clinical study that was carried out in Tuskegee, Alabama, between the years 1932 and 1972. In this study, 399 African-American sharecroppers who were impoverished and illiterate were prohibited from receiving treatment for syphilis. In addition, there was a control group of 201 individuals who did not have syphilis. This study became controversial due to the fact that it was carried out without the appropriate level of care for its subjects, which ultimately resulted in significant modifications to the way patients are safeguarded in clinical studies. Individuals who participated in the Tuskegee syphilis study were not given the opportunity to give their informed consent and were not informed of their diagnosis. Instead, they were told that they had bad blood and that in exchange for their participation, they would be eligible for free medical treatment, transportation to the clinic, meals and burial insurance in the event that they passed away. During the beginning of the study in 1932, the conventional treatments for syphilis were not only harmful but also poisonous and had a doubtful level of efficiency. To assess whether or not patients would benefit more from not being treated with these hazardous treatments was one of the primary objectives of the study when it was first conceived. There were a significant number of people who were routinely denied therapy. For the purpose of observing the tragic course of the disease, a large number of patients were deceived and had placebo therapies administered to them. Only 74 of the people who participated in the study were still living when it was over. Among the men, 28 had passed away as a direct result of syphilis, 100 had passed away as a result of complications related to the disease, 40 of their spouses had been infected, and 19 of their children had been born with congenital syphilis. Number 2. Unit 731. In the course of the Second Sino-Japanese War, 1937-1945, and World War II, the Imperial Japanese Army maintained a covert biological and chemical warfare research and development unit known as Unit 731. This outfit was responsible for conducting experiments on humans that were potentially fatal. It was accountable for a number of the most infamous war crimes that were committed by Japanese forces during military operations. A number of atrocities were committed by the commander Shiro Ishii and others working under his command in Unit 731. These atrocities include the vivisection of living people, including pregnant women who were impregnated by the doctors. Prisoners had their limbs amputated and reattached to other parts of their bodies, and some prisoners had parts of their bodies frozen and thawed in order to study the untreated gangrene that resulted from the freezing and thawing of their bodies. Additionally, human beings were utilized as living test subjects for grenade as well as flamethrowers. In order to investigate the impact of various disease strains, prisoners were given injections of the diseases under the pretext of immunizations. In order to investigate the consequences of untreated venereal illnesses, both male and female inmates were raped and then intentionally infected with syphilis and gonorrhea. The results of this experiment were then analyzed. Having been granted amnesty by the American occupation authorities at the conclusion of the war, Ishii never served any time in prison for his crimes. He passed away at the age of 67 from throat cancer. Number 1. Nazi experiments. The term Nazi human experimentation refers to the practice of conducting medical experiments on large numbers of individuals inside the concentration camps run by the Nazi regime in Germany during World War II. Under the direction of Dr. Edward Wirths, certain prisoners at Auschwitz were the subjects of a variety of experiments. These experiments were ostensibly designed to assist German military personnel in combat situations, to assist in the recovery of military personnel who had been injured and to advance the racial ideology that was supported by the Third Reich. For the purpose of demonstrating the parallels and differences in the genetics and eugenics of twins, as well as to determine whether or not the human body can be changed in an unnatural manner, experiments were conducted on twin children who were being held in concentration camps. At the center of the experiments was Dr. Josef Mengele, who carried out tests on more than 1,500 sets of imprisoned twins. Out of the total number of persons who survived the experiments, fewer than 200 individuals were able to escape. Through the use of twins, Dr. Mengele was able to coordinate genetic testing. The twins were separated into groups according to their ages and genders, and they were held in barracks in between the various tests. These tests included everything from injecting various chemicals into the twins' eyes to determine whether or not it would alter the colors of their eyes, to literally stitching the twins together in the hopes of generating conjoined twins. A series of trials were carried out by the Luftwaffe in 1942 in order to discover how to treat hypothermia. As shown in the image on the right, one study required participants to endure a tank of cold water for a period of up to 3 hours. For the purpose of another study, prisoners were exposed to temperatures below freezing for a period of several hours while they were naked. In this experiment, the researchers investigated several methods of rewarming the survivors. Experiments were carried out in Ravensbrück between the months of July 1942 and September 1943 in order to investigate the efficacy of sulfonamide, which is a synthetic antibacterial agent. Several types of bacteria, including streptococcus, gas gangrene, and tetanus, were found to be present in the wounds that were delivered to the individuals. It was necessary to produce a state that was comparable to that of a combat wound in order to stop the circulation of blood. This was accomplished by tying off blood vessels at both ends of the wound. The wounds were made worse by the introduction of wood shavings and ground glass, which exacerbated the infection. A number of medications, including sulfonamide, were used to treat the infection in order to evaluate how effective they were. Thank you for watching this harrowing episode of Creepshow. The stories of these unethical experiments remind us of the importance of ethical standards in science and medicine. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the macabre and mysterious. Hit the bell icon to get notified of our latest videos. Until next time, stay curious and stay cautious.